Hi guys, my name is Zach. Today I'm going to show you how to animate our enemy character. This does build on some things that were set up in a previous video. The link for that video is in the description. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to click on my enemy here and I'm going to go down to my project settings, go into monsters, sprites, mushroom, and then we have this attack animation. So I'm just going to highlight all of the sprites, drag them into the hierarchy to create a new animation. Okay, now that we've created this attack, I'm going to take these items and drag them into my animations folder. Once these are in the folder, we want to delete these animation controllers and repeat these steps for attack, idle, and running. We need all three of those animations. What we need to do is create a new animation controller. So we're going to right click, go to create animation controller, and we're going to name it mushroom. Now what we want to do is open our new animator. So go to the animator tab at the top. We want to drag in our animations. We want the idle animation to be the entry animation, and we want to set a transition from idle to attacking. Now we need to create a couple parameters. We want to create a new trigger. We're going to call it isAttacking. We're going to use this to determine if the attack animation should play. We're going to create a boolean called isRunning. We'll use this to determine if the character is running. I'm going to create my run animation here. You might have done this earlier. We're going to go back to our mushroom character, sprites, mushroom, run. Do the same thing, create a run animation. Delete this out of my hierarchy. Drag this to animations. Delete the controller for it. So now what we want to do is drag our run animation into our animator and create transitions both directions for all of our animations. So we only want to transition to attack if attacking is true and running is false. We only want to transition to running if running is true. We only want to transition back to idle if running is not true. We only want to attack while running if running is true and attacking is true. And we only want to transition back if isRunning is true. And we don't want an exit time on any of these. I'm pretty sure you can just check that box, but just to be on the safe side. So the one time we do want an exit time is when we're transitioning from attack animation to anything else, because we want to make sure there's time for the attack animation to complete. So what we actually want to do is check the box for has exit time, and we want it to be the length of one attack animation. So we want to take this transition time box and drag it all the way to the end so it transitions immediately at the end of the attack. And we want to do this for both of these exit transitions. Now I just want to double check and make sure that all of my animation transitions are set up correctly. And it looks like this one is not correct. Okay. Animator is done. Now our mushroom enemy needs some logic in his controller script. So let's open him up in the scene view, scroll down to our script, and click on Edit Script. This is going to open up in Visual Studio. Alright, so what we actually need to do is create a new variable for our animator. So we'll call it animator anim. And in our start method, which fires when the component is first created, we're going to set our new variable anim to getComponentAnimator. And change this to anim. Alright, now we have our animator to work with. Now what we want to do is we actually want to write a fixed update method because our character is going to be moving. So fixed update. And what we need to do is detect if the player is within a certain distance of the enemy. And if so, we want to change the direction of our enemy and start moving toward him. So let's go ahead and create a distance. This is going to be a float probably. And it's going to be equal to vector3.distance. So vector3.distance is a method that's built into Unity that will give you the distance between two different positions. So the first position is going to be our own position, the position of the enemy, transform.position. And the next one needs to be the position of the player. So what we need to do is actually get a reference to the player object. So we're going to create a new variable at the top here. We're going to call it GameObjectPlayer. And when we start the game, we're actually going to do a find on that object. So GameObject.find object with tag player. Now what this will do is this will find the object in the level that has the tag player. So we're going to set player equal to this. And then in our update method here, we'll do player dot transform dot position. All right, and we're going to have a public variable here that determines how far away our enemy will be from the player before he starts attacking. So we'll call this attack distance. And we'll set this equal to 3. And this is a float, so we'll just go ahead and add that in here. And we need another one in here that we'll call seek distance. Public float seek distance. We'll say it's 5F. Alright, so in our fixed update, if distance is less than seek distance, we want to move toward the enemy. So this is just a comment. It's not actually going to execute anything. It's just to let us know what we want to do. And we actually want another condition in here. So if it's less than seek distance, let's do an else. So if it's less than the seek distance, no. We'll do this in an else. So else if distance less than seek distance and move enemy. So I did this a little bit backwards here. We're going to do if distance is less than seek distance and actually we're going to say if distance is less than attack distance, we want to attack. And this is actually going to be another invoke call, like we did with the previous attack, because we want it to trigger in a certain amount of time. So change that to quotes, and we'll just call it 0.2f right now. I'll check the timing in a second. At this point, you will not have an attack method yet. Just create an empty method called attack for the purposes of this. So if the distance is less than the attack distance, then attack. Else, if the distance is less than seek distance, move toward the player. Else, do nothing, basically. So now we just need to add some logic for moving toward the player. So we need to determine what direction the player is from the character. All right, before we write this move toward method, I want to explain a little bit about 2D games. So in 2D games, there are position coordinates on every object in Unity. There's an X and a Y. And in 2D games, we don't really care about Z, but X and Y are important. So X is represented by the horizontal of your game, the horizontal axis, and Y is the vertical. So if you go to the transform and you move your X axis, you'll see that it changes this value depending on where he is on the screen. So if I move him to the left, the value gets smaller, and if I move him to the right, the value gets bigger. So this we can use to tell where the player is in relation to the enemy. So if we compare the mushroom's X value of -2 to the character's X value of -8, we'll know that since -8 is less than -2, we'll know that he is to the left of our character. So we will need to flip around and move toward that direction. So let's go ahead and start implementing something like that. So we're just going to call a method called move toward player. And this method doesn't exist yet, so we have to write one. So let's go in here, delete that, and we're going to create a public void, I guess private, method called move toward player. And what we need to do is calculate what direction the enemy is from us. So if player.transform.position.x is less than our own transform.position.x, we want to move left. Else, we want to move right. So to move our character, what we want to do is we want to make sure that our local scale is set to -1 or -3, I think. Let's take a look. So in our mushroom, we set our scale to 2.5. So if we need to go left, we want to make sure that our X is set to -2.5 so that our character will flip around and face that direction. So first thing we want to do is go to transform.scale, local scale, and so it has get and set. Okay, so we want to set this equal to, what is it? It is a vector 3. Okay, so we need to create a new vector. And we want -2.5, 2.5 for the Y because he's not getting any smaller, and 0 for the Z because we don't use it. Now we only actually want to do this if our scale is not already negative. So we're going to do another if here. So if our local scale, so if our local scale dot x is equal to, or is greater than 0, basically. So if it's a positive number, we want to flip it. All right. And then we want to start moving toward the enemy. So if we're facing in the right direction, we want to start translating toward the character, the enemy character. So we want to do our transform.translate. And we want, let's see here. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to move in a certain direction. So we want to move in our transform.right times our direction. Now, direction is going to be a number that's either 0 or 1 based on the direction we want to go. So we also, inside this if statement, is set a direction. So we're going to declare one up here. We're going to call it an integer direction, and it's going to equal this Boolean. So if this evaluates to true with our ternary, then we want this to be -1. Else we want this to be 1. So what this is called a ternary expression. So this is an if statement. This is an if, then this, else, then this. So if our x of the player is less than the x of our enemy, return -1. So if we multiply right by -1, we're going to get left, which is the direction that we want to move. So now that we've kind of made this independent of this if block, we can actually extract it. So we cut this out here, and we'll put it at the bottom. Else for move right, we need the same code, but we want to flip it. So if local scale is less than 0, then we want to change it to the positive version of itself. So this if block is literally just to flip our character around to face the correct direction. So also when we're moving our character, we want to move in a certain speed over time.delta time. So times direction times speed, which we haven't set up yet, but we'll set it up here in a second, times time.delta time. So it doesn't recognize speed as variable because we haven't created yet. So let's go ahead and declare a speed variable up here. Public speed float. It's a float. We'll set it to 10 to start. And that should be that. So now our character will move toward the enemy. Maybe I spelled something wrong. Yeah, I did. Move toward our enemy if he is in range. So let's go ahead and try it out and see what it does. Okay. So he is moving toward us, but it's acting a little bit weird. So what he's doing right now is he's moving into attack speed, and his rotation flipped. So if we go to the mushroom, we need to go to his rigid body, and we need to freeze his Z so that he can not flip around like he was. And we need to reduce that attack distance to be equal to a much smaller number. So what we actually need to do is reduce our attack distance so that it's more reasonable, and maybe increase our seek distance. I think our attack distance is probably something very small because his attack box is very small. So I'm going to do something like 0.75. And I'm going to try to run this here. All right. So he is going right at us. So maybe 725 is too small. We should also reduce our speed by some, so let's try 5. So we could actually like maybe run away from our enemy now. Alright. So another thing I've noticed is that our mushroom animator is actually not set. So if we go back into our mushroom folder, we actually need to drag this animator into the animation controller on our mushroom character. So now, if we play this, he should automatically switch to idle when the game starts, and he should switch to... well, we haven't set up any additional animations yet. But I think 0.75 is a little too small for his attack box, so I'm going to change it to like 1.2 maybe. And let's go ahead and go back into our enemy script. I'm going to change the speed to maybe like 3. And we'll open this up. And now what we need to do is when he's actually moving, we need to set his boolean for his animator to is running. So nm.setBool is running to true. And we need to set it to false when he's not running. So let's copy this and we'll set it to false if he's not moving at all. So false. And when we invoke attack, as soon as we, I didn't mean to do that. As soon as we invoke attack, we want to set that trigger. So set trigger is attacking. All right. So let's go ahead and give this a test run. So he's doing his idle animation. Okay, so he's trying to attack us now. But we never switch out of the attacking animation. So let's take a look at why that's happening. Okay, so I think the problem is that in my animator for my monster attack, exit time was not checked. I go ahead and check it now, and it looks like he'll switch back into idle animator after he attacks if I'm not close enough. He's not really switching back to running mode though. He's just kind of like walking. So let's look at why he is not switching to the run animation. So I'm going to set up the animator side by side so that I can see what animation our enemy goes into. And I'm going to drag it over. So if he is running, he should switch into run animation. So let's go ahead and click that. Alright, so he's not in run animation, and he never goes into run animation. So let's take a look. So move toward player. Because we set it to false immediately after setting it to true. So we call this method if less than seek distance, move toward player, set animation running, and then immediately after that if, we set it to false. So this actually needs to be in an additional else clause. So if we are not within seeking distance of the player, then set running to false. So let's go ahead and do that. And now if we click play, he runs toward us, and if we run away, he goes to idle. Perfect. So our enemy is now operating animation-wise as we would expect. In the next video, I'll go over how to set up the attack logic in killing the player with the enemy's attacks. But if you like this video, if you learned something, please like and subscribe and leave a comment down below. Thanks for watching.